I had been planning on this video for a long time, and doing my research, I discovered something I don't think I quite understood the full ramifications of before. King of the Hill is an awesome show, my god. Yeah, there's a lot to not like about this show, and I'll get to them in a little bit, but oh my god. I've been watching scores of episodes of this show non-stop for the past few weeks, and it really reignited my love of this show. It was different than any other adult animation out there, and how grounded it was. I love The Simpsons as much as anyone else, but my god, we needed a show like King of the Hill right next to it. This gave animation really serious credit as a medium that could be just as mature as live-action sitcoms, at least in the West. Animation was, and well, still kinda is, seen as a medium that is manic. Either manic for children or manic toward adults. So a show as grounded in reality as King of the Hill serves to counteract the idea that, animation couldn't be taken seriously as an art form. And yeah, King of the Hill was a comedy. It made no qualms about that. But it was a different kind of comedy. The sort of blue-collar, humble kind of stuff. Dale Gribble driving a tractor through the Whataburger drive-thru? My dad and sister once rode a go-kart to the dollar store once. It can happen. I'm a Texan, born, bred, and raised, so I'm probably biased toward liking this show. I'll admit, there are a lot of things that hit me up right in my pandering zone. My mom was a former manager at Luli's. There was never another show like King of the Hill anywhere. I mean, I guess you could say Bob's Burgers is its most obvious spiritual successor, and even though I think Bob's Burgers is a much better show, it doesn't capture what made King of the Hill good exactly. Now, because of the medium and that blue-collar sense of realism, there are a lot of ways where that really doesn't come in handy, and that can make for a lot of the worst episodes of the show. So before I go into details, I just want to make two things perfectly clear so I don't have to repeat myself. Number one, Mike Judge is the guy who created Beavis and Butthead, Office Space, and Silicon Valley. He's an Austinite. I don't think he meant for the moderate social conservatism of Hank and Arlen in general to be in the absolute right, but it does kind of come off that way when the character we're supposed to sympathize with, above others, Hank Hill, is thrown up against strawmen. For what it's worth, Mike Judge is pretty tight-lipped about his personal political beliefs and prefers to let the story speak for themselves, which I definitely admire that in him not wanting to alienate. So for this list, we're going to divorce the possible intentions of a bunch of Californians writing for Texans and treat each episode as its own entity, free of the intention of those who might have created it. We're invoking full death of the author here. And I don't want to get too apologetic. Number two, Hank Hill is an asshole. Like I said, the show more often than not does present him as being in the absolute right. And this is hard when your character is as unsympathetic as he can get. To be honest, I kind of think he's on the autism spectrum. Because let's face it, that boy ain't right. And there are a lot of reasons why I headcanon that. Sometimes I connect with him being on the spectrum myself. And listen, I can tell you, we're jerks. We are the worst. I don't need to watch someone on TV like me to know how much I suck. A lot of people hate Peggy Hill, but yeah, I never understood that. She just seems kinda okay. She was never really too out there, too unsympathetic. Her and Hank kinda contrast off of each other pretty well. I think they make a nice couple. Still, I'd take a Hank Hill over a Sheldon Cooper any day. So, now that we got all that out there, let's get to the worst that this show has to offer. Grab your Alamo beer and your propane accessories, but not your propane. My family uses mesquite. Number 10. A good B plot can let me forgive the A plot. And while this B plot spared the whole episode from being in the top 5, it wasn't enough to keep it on the honorable mentions. I had to talk about this one. Alright, the plot of this is that Bobby gets a ventriloquist dummy, and the dummy's personality is really into sports. Hank takes a liking to the dummy, Chip Block, at the expense of the feelings of the puppeteer. And, okay, this whole episode has a lot of behavior by Hank that is just unjustified. He acts very bizarrely and uncharacteristically dismissive of his own son, and watching him be so proud of the dummy as if it's a person, it just isn't very pleasant to watch. And yeah, we know it's supposed to be wrong, but it doesn't make for much fun. So if that's the A plot I'm talking about, what could possibly be the B plot that saves this? Well, Dale Gribble is terrified of the dummy, and he spends the whole episode trying to kill it and destroy it as if it's a real person. Dale Gribble is my favorite character on the show by a nautical mile. Everything he does is just great, so this is a lot of fun. And the stinger to this episode, probably one of the funniest things King of the Hill has ever done.
Perimeter breach.
Check out the whole episode if you can and judge for yourself. Maybe you'll see it differently than I do. But it's all worth it for the stinger, believe you me. Number 9. Hey, remember when I said a few sentences ago that I thought Hank Hill had autism?
Wait, where are my truck keys? I need something to jangle.
That is the definition of an autistic stim. He plays with those keys like I drink bottles of water. Okay, so the plot of this episode is that Enrique is kicked out of his wife's house, and in his desperation and loneliness, he turns to Hank Hill for comfort. This episode does its job too well. It's too realistic with Enrique's problems. You could either make them super over the top or not matter at all. But, this kinda hits really close to home as something that could happen. So it's not very funny, it's just disturbing and kinda sad. This is probably the episode where I sympathize with Hank the most, because I know he's not asking for any of this and he's just as terrified as we are. Yeah, this is a borderline horror episode. I mentioned it in my Simpsons review that I actually have a really big fear of home invasions, so yeah, this episode was not made for me. Yeesh. Number 8. Anyone who knows me in real life or on the internet can attest to the fact that I am a total and complete Agent Scully, which is weird because my namesake is Agent Mulder. But yes, I am a complete and total skeptic. I buy into no mumbo jumbo of any variety, and I am in active disdain of anyone who does. This includes, but ain't limited to, conspiracy theorists, the organic food nut and vegan umbrella, anti-vaxxers, religious fundies, religious moderates, agnostics, people who share anti-GMO memes on Facebook even they don't know what a GMO constitutes and are completely oblivious to all the life-saving work that comes with the modification of crops, and people who are way into the shit they read on men's health, gym whores as I like to call them. But even I want to defend these people. I mean, come on, give them a balanced portrayal, give them a fair fight. So this is the episode where Bobby joins a group of tarot card reading. Yeah, the mythology isn't exactly clear. They sort of come to mind those anti-Dungeons and Dragons PSAs from the 1980s, sort of the chick tracks and the occult and the wizards and stuff like that. I mean, this is just really mean depiction. I don't know. Look, I'm on the border. I live near and I'm a bunch of Mexicans. So, look, my experience with people real into this kind of occult Santeria stuff is that, one, they're mostly female as opposed to the all-male virgins depicted here, and pretty into the other natural, not always as a sincere belief, but often as a way to help maintain cultural identity in a world that is rapidly globalizing. And two, they're high-functioning. These nerds in this episode can only have a conversation about their weird mythos, but every one of the Umbrella Santeria people I've ever had a conversation with, they've talked about other things. I've gotten along with them. They're nice people. They don't attack you with their beliefs. I don't know who or what this episode wants to warn us about. Honestly, I guess a group of pretty strong 7 pansexual women who dress in black and talk to crystals and are vegans wouldn't be much of an indication that these people are losers. This episode is highly painful and its existence is inexplicable to me. Number 7. There's a video on the internet I'm going to link to in the description that involves a cat jumping into a soldier's arms after he returns from his tour of duty. This video is infinity times better than all the ones with dogs out there because look at that, it's a giant fluff ball. That's not a cat, that's fluff. Yeah, this episode doesn't make any sense. Hank is inspired by Bill taking care of a soldier's dog while he's deployed overseas, and then Hank decides to do the same. However, instead of getting a dog, Hank gets instead a cat. Can you imagine the hysterics? This doesn't make any sense. I mean, isn't there a form Hank could check to see what kind of animal he was getting? I mean, I've known some military guys who own reptiles and snakes and stuff. What if Hank was allergic to cats? Why would you stick it with him then? It's clear that he's not prepared to take care of a cat, and they have no indication. The military honestly isn't really depicted as being understanding here, which, I mean, I guess they don't have to. They have other concerns for the most part, but it's surprisingly mean-spirited portrayal. Also, the vet, played by Jason Bateman, which really brought me out of the episode, is a crook, and that's not very pleasant to watch at all. None of this episode works. Everything is just painful to watch. Also, I know that's the joke of the episode, but why is it that having that cat isn't seen as masculine or desirable?
A poodle? Why not go all the way and just get me a cat and a sex change operation?
Ernest Hemingway was a famous cat person, and he was so manly he killed himself. Yet, like I said before, a B-plot can't save an episode, and man, does this episode go out of the way to show Bill just having the best time of his life. I think it's meant to underscore Hank's suffering to show Bill having such an over-the-top good time, but man, look at him having so much fun. I'll take what I can get. Look at him, he's on a frickin' airplane carrier. Goddamn. Number 6. Ew! This episode has 2 plots to it. 1, soccer is for fags, and B, the coach is insane. And yeah, it's the first plot that really pisses me off of this one. Now listen, I hate soccer with a passion. I mean, I'm Mexican, and to me, real football has quarterbacks and touchdown dances because I'm right and everybody else is wrong. But at least I know soccer. That's the metric system, right? The metric system, that's why that's doing that. I don't know why else it could be going up instead of down. It's just, why is, now it's at, what just happened? Well, what's going on? I don't understand. I don't understand how this works. I've been exposed to soccer fans. I know why people like it. I know the extent to that it's popular in the international community. So maybe these soccer mom stereotypes, they're different in Anglo country. You know, whereas someone in Central or East Texas sees soccer fans as snooty, milled upper-class mothers watching their kids, what I picture when I think of soccer fans is a bunch of British shirtless dudes beating the fuck out of each other like it's the end of the world. I had a cousin who played soccer, and she ran more suicides than I've probably walked total distance in my entire life. It's not a hippy-dippy sport, and I don't know why it's being portrayed as such. It's a really bad argument for something you agree with. For me, it's like watching a Michael Moore movie. On one hand, I agree with the main plots of him, but on the other hand, fuck Michael Moore. Fuck him, he's an asshole. He's an asshole and he sucks. I hate it. I don't actually have much of a problem with the coach plot. I find his sociopathy so over the top, it's hilarious. To me, it helps that he's kind of a loser working a menial job, and he gets his comeuppance in the form of physical pain. Number 5. Oh my god, this fucking episode gives me hives. I've despised this episode since the first time I ever saw it. I went into making this list expecting it to be number 1. And yeah, it wasn't, so you know, that should tell you something. Yeah, this is about where we get into my complete and utter rage, so buckle in folks, this is gonna suck. This episode is so puritanical and it reeks of the worst baby boomer angst. Baby boomers, the 90s kids of the 60s. Yeah, this is the episode where Hank decides that everything Bobby likes is bad and he has to be an asshole to everyone because everything he likes is good and they're strawman hippie parents and I want to kill everyone with a shovel. Look, I'm usually more forgiving. I'm trying to understand the nuance of a situation, but oh my god, this episode just really went too far. Why should I make the effort to understand if it won't? I find it really hard to sympathize with anyone really but the poor kids in this episode. They don't have much to do. Like, it's one thing to give a straw man as the bad guys, but it's another to make the good guys as unsympathetic as well. This episode falls squarely into the Hank Hill is always right camp, which is the root of a lot of bad with this show. Even the B-plot where Peggy tries to convince the other wives that Hank really is sexy just buys into this. It's gross. And there's nothing to suggest that Hank Hill might even be a little wrong. That even the stuff he liked at some point was considered very provocative. The only nods to the generational shift and times evolving are dismissed as being incorrect. I can't stand it. Hell, Elvis Presley's hip-shaking dancing was at one point considered severely controversial. Do any of y'all remember that? Well, I don't. Because that Ed Sullivan Show appearance, where he was infamously filmed from the waist up the entire time, was broadcast 14 years before my dad was even born. Apparently it got a lot of mockery at the time, too. This comedian, Ernie Kovacs, known for his experimental nature and being fucking awesome, had this skit that involved that Elvis Presley Show appearance, and I can't find the video of it. I can't find any sources outside of TV tropes. So this may or may not have happened, but he at one point had a skit that had the bottom half of Elvis revealed finally, which was a pair of animatronic pants dancing with a guitar. This has nothing to do with the episode except to mention that, we can go against the cultural norms in contemporary times, as may just not be remembered as much. But also because it's one of my favorite things ever. I hope to God it's true. Why would anyone lie on TV tropes? It's super unregulated, so the free market clears it of any lies. Roll the next episode. Number 4. Of all the Strawman episodes, this one probably pissed me off the most because of the context. That is to say, there is none. There is no context. This episode is as guided as well as 3 blind people driving a bus. Bobby tries to set up a school carnival because he wants to do something exciting for school, and it gets ruined by a diversity counselor, whatever the fuck that means, who goes in and something. Arlen seems like a pretty diverse town. It's not like a school just being integrated in the 60s. And he shows up and commandeers the carnival for no reason. I don't mean to give a stupid reason. I can't see why he would try and insert himself into this with any real authority. They give a sort of a half-ass attempt to make fun at political correctness and PC culture, but they don't really do that consistent. I'm not exactly sure what this episode is trying to do. It's kind of a mess. Also, I just want to say I'm not against the idea of diversity counselors in real life. The concept of, let's understand what privilege means and let's try not to kill each other in the coming race war. That's not a bad lesson necessarily to tell. Yeah, I know my inner SJW is coming out, but fuck you. He just turns that into some sort of pretentious, weird Stanford experiment nonsense to a bunch of children. It'd be one thing if it was offensive funny, but it's not even, funny. This is a pretty weak episode. It's just, wrong. Can't say I like it. Just a mess. Fuck Whitey. Number 3. Man, this episode's pretty high on my list. So, I know what you might be thinking.
Oh, Fox Navarro is a total skeptic. He probably doesn't like the religious aspects of this episode.
But no, honestly, that's not it. I kind of like church hopping. So that episode's not on this list despite its reputation. Maybe it's because of a bad subplot or bad characterization. No, honestly, everyone's good. Everyone's in character.
Oh, maybe he's just an SJW and he's offended as the portrayal of Catholicism.
Well, I do kind of think it's weird that Catholicism is alienated when it makes up a quarter of the people. But I'm not offended on behalf of them. I just think it's weird. No, that's not it either. Listen, this episode commits the major, unforgivable sin that comes with being a television comedy. It's just not that funny. And I'd say it's not funny at all. Every single other episode on this list, another episode I watched, I got an open mouth laugh. Listen, it's easy to make me laugh. I am a laugh slut. I will chuckle to anything. But this is one of the only episodes I can think of that I never just gave a full open-mouthed laugh in. Even the scene with Hank Hill changing the propane tank in hell, that should have gotten me, but I don't know. Maybe it's because I was expecting it. Maybe it was just too weird for me to laugh at, but no, that wasn't very funny either. That, like I said, no other episode I found just as unfunny and uninteresting. And it's not like this episode didn't have potential. They weren't really making fun of anybody but Peggy Hill. And even then, they weren't really making fun of her either. I don't think this episode knows what its target is. At least when the Simpsons made fun of Catholicism with their episode, they packed some punches. They took the mythology and they, had fun with it. They had fun with the idea of, religions competing against each other for asses in the pews. It was, that episode had bite. This episode, there's not that much to it. I don't know what to tell you. It's just, I can forgive a lot of things, but I cannot forgive just not being funny. Number 2. Oh boy. Okay, how many of you have seen the Simpsons episode Lemon of Troy? Yeah, I'm bringing that show a lot when I just pretty much insulted it in the beginning. But listen, that episode was the one that introduced us to the city of Shelbyville. They made sure we knew that it sucked, ... from the main character's point of view. Everyone in Shelbyville was a bizarro version of someone from Springfield, and that was really good because, one, it gave us the ability to quickly identify new characters, and two, it humanized Shelbyville as its own place with its own story. When you see two communities recounting different versions of the same story at the end of the episode, you understand something that, yeah, it's a rivalry, but at the end of the day, everyone's human, they all have their own motivations. We're just glad the team that we're rooting for won, and it's all in good fun. So my point is, if you do want to turn a fictional or real place into a sitcom nemesis, make sure it's a fair fight. Look, if this episode had been willing to criticize Texas the same way it would Canada, this very well might have been a top 10 best list. But without that, we just see a very one-sided fight, and it's very uncomfortable. Hank and the white guy Canadian neighbor, whose name I forget, are the same character basically. They're bullheaded jingoists who love their way to the deterrent of any other way. Except one is depicted clearly in the right and the correct, and the Canadian is a straw man purposely given weak arguments and playing outside of home court advantage. Listen, I get why Canada is a good target. It's the country most like America, so we can make fun of it completely guilt-free by mocking, the little differences, like how they drink their milk in bags, or how their radio stations are required to play a certain number of their own artists. This episode seems to believe that all Canadians are either jingoistic assholes who decide to vacation in another country because reasons, or promiscuous Francos. I should mention they're from a town called Duluth, Ontario, and that's near Toronto. And both of those are predominantly English-speaking areas. The province of Nuevo Leon has a much better French to English ratio. They could have just done that if they wanted to give that, Boomhauer love interest Canadian French thing. I don't know. This episode reads like the rantings of someone who was cut off by a car with British Columbian license plates and never forgets about it. The kind of guy who, if you ask him, we're building a wall on the wrong border. Hey, I was going to say that. Mysterious Mr.Enter did a review of this episode, and it's pretty good at getting all the little messed up things. I don't want to repeat things that he said better, so if you have time, go check it out. It's a really good review. And before we get to the one episode to rule all the suck, here's a little place for the episodes that did suck, I'd say, but not quite enough to earn my full, unadulterated scorn. Manger Baby Einstein. Yeah, character derailments on Luann's part and her acquainted situational narcissism make this, really unpleasant to watch. Now, I couldn't be too mad, though, because, always around the corner was my pride and joy, Dale Gribble. I would totally read the magic bullet to my children, for the record. Husky Bobby. Okay, this is an episode that's really infamous for a lot of reasons, and a lot of really good ones, to be honest. The fact that at the climax there were no adults around to save the kids from being pelted with food sort of reeks of the worst and most cynical that humanity has to offer. Maybe it's a metaphor for some kind of teenage wasteland, but honestly, I don't hate this episode as much as I remember. The message is basically one of, don't express yourself too much or you'll make yourself out a target to bad people. And that's not a bad moral in my opinion. Hank knows that kids are mean, and he doesn't want Bobby to make himself a target because, let's face it, what father would? Crushing a child's dream isn't nice or really even good for society as much as teaching your own fuck-ass kids not to target people for being fat because that's so fucking important. But I don't know, it's a moral that I feel has value. It's a cruel moral, but the world is a cruel place. It may come from Hank the Skank, but I'm sorry, I don't really have a problem with this. I think this is important to teach kids. Maybe not in this way, but in some way or another. Just another manic con day. Oh man, this show should really not tackle mental illness as liberally as it does. If I didn't love cons so much, then this might be a lot more of an unbearable episode. It wasn't as bad as I was expecting, but still that one line, that one thing at the end of the episode where after all the shit he goes through, after Con very nearly commits suicide and goes off the rails, that one line where he says,
All in all, I have to say it was worth it.
Oh my god, that line is so obnoxious. I almost put this episode on the list just for that line alone. Please, anyone listening out there, take your medication. It came from the garage. A lot of this episode is actually really good. And a lot of it is uncomfortable character derailment. I just want to say, who's afraid of bats? It's like adorable flying murder sky kitten. Lost in My Space. I remember watching this episode when it aired in 2009 and thinking, wow, that's topical. You didn't have to do this. You didn't have to do this. What makes Bobby run? Okay, a lot of this episode is Bobby being awesome, and I like that. That's great. I support Bobby. But a lot of it kind of reveals the creepy obsession that Texans have with middle and high school football and rituals especially. And I'm a born and raised Texan, and like I can say that we take this level of football kind of way too damn seriously. I mean, taking basketball seriously is fine though. Basketball is awesome. The courtship of Joseph's father. Yeah, this is a delightfully zany and sometimes emotionally touching third act that saves an episode that had really been cringeworthy up until then. Don't know if I'd recommend the whole thing. Reborn to be wild. No, I can only take so much of this shit. And the number one episode, worst of the bunch, is... Luann Virgin 2.0. Okay, this episode has some really, really, really bad ideas behind it. Looking back, the whole idea that you can be a born-again virgin is probably one of the things I hated most learning about from this show. Now, for those of you who don't know, Born-Again Virgins, besides being a short-lived rom-com on the good BET, is when pretty much what you'd expect. Someone who used to be sexually active thenceforth decides to be celibate. You cast a few magic spells on him and voila, guilt absolved. And look, I'm Arrow. Lots of my friends are on the Avon spectrum. So the idea that marriage is, well, so necessary, I'm sorry, I don't entirely agree with that. I don't know if I'll ever get married. Tinder canceled my account due to lack of interest. Why should some magic spells in a government document dictate my life? Why all this shame on people who decide to enjoy sex without the burden of some bored county magistrate giving the okay sign? Okay, the ideas behind this episode are bad. They represent the very bad ideas in our culture and this world. Listen, I shouldn't have to know that artificial hymens exist. I don't want to live in a world where they have to exist. And lines like these...
And 19. Well, when you say it, it doesn't sound like much, but when you're sitting there with 19 Hershey's Kisses in front of you, that's a lot of chocolate.
No, that's wrong. That is not right. Look at this guy. He is absolutely bawling. He is crying. He is ashamed beyond any reasonable measure to be ashamed of. And what was his crime? He creamed himself after an otherwise innocent massage.
This sort of thing happens every day. A young man, naked, in a massage parlor.
Whoa, gee, no, sir. No, sir. I wasn't at a massage parlor. I was at an arts and craft fair. I took my shirt off. Stupid red. Then she put me face down in this padded, I don't know, what, a sex chair, and started rubbing my shoulders, and then she brushed against me, and she smelled so good. Oh, I felt this. And then I sinned my pants.
Oh, that's not losing your virginity. All you lost was those pants.
And that's not funny. I'm sorry, I don't find that funny. This is a guy who needs to understand that his libido is as human as the rest of us. The fact that this church, the organization for him he is choosing to go for help, is absolving him of any wrongdoing without condemning the environment and the cultural supremacy that would lead a man to feel this much shame and guilt, nor the ridiculous BS social taboo places like these have against premarital sex is abhorrent behavior. I can't stand it. You can read stories from lots of people who have a fear or a shame of sexuality drilled into their heads, and it messes them up for the rest of their life. It damages their romantic relationships and the ability to have sex and the ability to get married or have love even. Like the idea that love and sex are so closely connected, not even love and sex and marriage, the fact that they're so closely connected, that is not something we should advocate for. And listen, a lot of those horror stories, that's in this country. This is the greatest country on earth. We have an open internet. We have freedom of speech. We got civil liberties at the wazoo. We are the best country in the world. But admittedly, the social mores are still there because, listen, we live in a society, we are much more religious than your average first world country. But I cannot imagine if it can get that bad in this country, what must life be like in some third world hellhole where the theocracy is turned up to 11? This isn't right. I'm reminding you, artificial hymens exist. Those aren't for superficial purposes. Those are for women for whom their virginity can determine their societal worth. Not their self-worth, their societal worth. What they can do, whether their families will condemn them, whether they'll get stoned to death. And listen, for this country to have anything to do with those backward-ass, regressive, theocratic ideas, those not the place I want us as a society to be in. Listen, fuck. Don't fuck. Marry young. Marry old. Don't marry. Marry the same sex. Marry any other sex. Marry 3 people. As long as they're all having fun, it doesn't matter. Do poly. Be straight. Be gay. Like them both. Alternate like direct voltage. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. It doesn't determine your worth as a person, and it shouldn't determine your worth as a person. And I'm sorry, anyone who disagrees with that, anyone who thinks that a woman should only be a virgin on her wedding night, anyone who would slut shame another person like this, anyone who sees a guy crying his eyes out, feeling absolute shame because he creamed himself while being touched by a woman, I'm sorry. If you agree with that, you need to move the fuck out of my country and you get the hell over to Saudi Arabia where you'll go let some teenage girls burn to death because your book of the worst magic spells out there say that a woman with exposed hair makes her a whore and she deserves to die even though she's in a burning building. Oh yeah, there's an actual episode here. No, I just want to say that, watching Luann sexualized like this, Luann being the titular born-again virgin, it's a lot like watching your 7th grade cousin try and be sexy. Luann is pretty juvenile, so it's just uncomfortable, awkward. Hank finds out Peggy wasn't a virgin on their wedding night, and that makes the biggest conflict of this episode. That upsets him greatly because it was her who insisted that they wait to get physical in the first place. And a lot of people hate this plot because they think Hank is being unfair, but honestly, given the fact that it was Peggy who made the insistence, that kind of makes me go on his side. Yeah, I know. Ain't that weird? I'm really glad they added that level of nuance and didn't make it so that it was entirely Hank's point of view. It really prevents Hank from being into that friend's dad who insists that his children call him sir even though he's a draft dodger and the most military thing he's ever done was shit on the entire Mexican people. Hank does forgive Peggy when she does the whole burn-again virgin thing, but that's not because he buys it. In fact, he admits the whole idea is BS. Honestly, he just forgives Peggy because deadass. Yeah, okay, I wasn't sure whether this or Uh-Oh Canada would be number 1. Considering I wrote an entire term paper on it without even thinking about it, yeah, it's clear which one drew the most of my ire. So, for its connection to real life, Luann Virgin 2.0, the worst episode of King of the Hill. Fuck you, Tony Perkins. And that was my worst list. There's no video right now because my computer is still weird. So have my disembodied voice over this stock image. Please stay tuned for my new series. Me and my friends are going to read a bunch of crappy books. We're going to start with Hilary Duff Project Elixir. And we're going to read it word by word, chapter by chapter. We hope to get to these real soon. The top 10 best King of the Hill episodes is coming in a little bit, and trust me, there's going to be a lot to like with that one. So until then, write, comment, subscribe, do all the things you were going to do anyway, but better now. If you wanna, you can do them. So go do it. Until then, I'll see you next time. Elaine Chow.